Have you ever noticed a moment when someone suddenly begins behaving differently around you, almost as if they quietly rewrote their entire approach overnight? Not dramatically, not in a way that everyone else can easily see, but subtle shifts start appearing. Their tone softens, their reactions become more measured, their presence around you becomes intentional. At first it feels confusing. You ask yourself a simple question: why would someone completely change the way they interact with me? People rarely transform their behavior without a reason. Human beings are creatures of patterns. We repeat what feels natural. We rely on familiar emotional habits. So when someone deliberately adjusts those habits, when they start controlling how they speak, how they react, how they show up around you, something psychological is happening beneath the surface. And here is the part that most people overlook. Sometimes the reason a person changes their entire approach toward you is not because they suddenly became someone new. It is because they did not want to look a certain way in your eyes. Now, before we go deeper, something important needs to be said clearly. This conversation is not about encouraging manipulation, dishonesty, or interfering with someone else's commitments. Understanding human psychology should never be used to exploit people or cross ethical boundaries. The goal here is awareness. When you understand the subtle emotional mechanisms behind people's behavior, you gain clarity. You become better at recognizing intentions, respecting boundaries, and protecting your own emotional well-being. Human relationships are complex. They are layered with emotions, insecurities, desires, fears, and subconscious motivations that even the person experiencing them may not fully understand. This video is simply about recognizing those patterns, nothing more. Now, with that foundation in place, let's look at what actually drives someone to quietly change the way they approach you. At the core of this behavior is something deeply human: perception. The way we believe another person sees us can reshape our behavior more powerfully than almost anything else. When someone cares about how you perceive them, their mind begins running a constant internal calculation. How do I appear right now? Did that comment make me look insecure? Did that reaction make me seem too interested? Did I reveal too much? This internal dialogue can slowly reshape how they interact with you. Here is where it gets interesting. Often the change begins after a specific emotional moment. Maybe they felt they revealed too much vulnerability. Maybe they sensed they came across as overly eager. Maybe they noticed your reaction to something they said. And suddenly their subconscious decides something important. I need to adjust how I show up around this person. From that point forward, their behavior begins shifting in ways that feel subtle but noticeable. Pay attention to this. One of the first signs appears in their eye contact. Before the shift, their gaze may have been natural and relaxed. After the shift, you might notice brief pauses before they look at you, or moments where they look away slightly sooner than before. This is subtle, but powerful. Eye contact reveals emotional exposure. When someone becomes aware of how they appear to you, they begin managing that exposure. You may also notice changes in the rhythm of conversation. Their pauses become more controlled. Their responses become slightly more thoughtful. Sometimes they even speak a little slower, as if choosing words carefully. This happens because their mind is no longer operating on pure instinct. It is editing itself in real time. Another interesting detail appears in the way they react to your attention. Before the shift, they may have responded immediately. After the shift, there may be a brief delay. Not because they lost interest, but because they are regulating how much interest they reveal. Here is where most people get it wrong. They interpret this behavior as emotional distance. But in many cases, it is actually emotional awareness. The person is trying to avoid appearing too obvious, and this creates a fascinating psychological tension. Part of them wants to express genuine emotion. Another part of them wants to protect how they are perceived. This creates what psychologists often describe as a push and pull dynamic. Sometimes they seem warm, open, and naturally engaged. Other times they appear slightly more reserved. It can feel confusing, but this internal conflict often comes from two competing emotional forces: desire and self-protection. One side of their mind is drawn toward connection. The other side is trying to maintain composure, so their behavior becomes carefully balanced. Now let's explore something even more revealing: the contrast between public and private behavior. Have you ever noticed how someone behaves one way in a group setting, but differently when the two of you are alone? In a group environment, their approach might appear neutral. Their body language remains composed. Their tone stays measured. But when the environment becomes more private, subtle changes appear. Their posture relaxes. Their voice softens. Their eye contact becomes slightly longer. This contrast happens because social environments increase self-awareness. When other people are present, the person becomes more conscious of how their behavior might be interpreted, so they manage it. But in quieter moments, the guard lowers. Text communication often reveals another layer. In person, they may appear calm and controlled, but in messages, small hints of emotion slip through. The timing of replies, the way sentences are structured, the occasional message that feels slightly more personal than expected. These details reveal the emotional energy they are trying to regulate. But perhaps the most telling moment happens when the emotional tension becomes too strong. Sometimes the person briefly pulls back. Their tone becomes cooler. Their responses become shorter. This can feel confusing if you are on the receiving end, but psychologically, it often reflects internal conflict. Part of them worries they may be revealing too much, so they create distance to regain emotional balance. Then later, the warmth returns. This cycle can repeat quietly over time. Now, this is where integrity and maturity become essential. Recognizing these patterns should never lead someone to manipulate another person's emotions or take advantage of vulnerability. Real emotional intelligence means respecting boundaries. It means understanding that every person deserves honesty, clarity, and dignity in their relationships. Just because someone may be adjusting their behavior around you does not mean they are inviting pressure or expectation. Human emotions are complex, and sometimes people simply need space to understand their own feelings. Awareness should lead to empathy, not control. The most powerful response to these dynamics is not manipulation. It is calm observation, respectful distance when needed, and emotional self-respect. Because the truth is this: when someone changes their entire approach toward you because they care about how they appear in your eyes, it reveals something profound about human nature. We do not carefully manage our behavior around people who mean nothing to us. We only do that when their perception matters. So if you ever notice these subtle shifts, the careful pauses, the thoughtful reactions, the quiet adjustments in tone and energy, understand that you are witnessing something deeply psychological. Someone is aware of you, aware of how they appear to you, and that awareness has quietly reshaped their behavior. Have you ever noticed these patterns before? Moments where someone's entire energy toward you subtly changed. Pay attention to those details. Human behavior often whispers the truth long before words ever say it out loud. If you found this insight valuable, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for more deep psychological perspectives on human relationships.